Hey guys, so I think most of you that probably are going to jump into this event probably know me, but for those that don't, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Samantha Mullaney, and I have a daughter with biliary atresia who is 2 years old, and she has had quite a journey. Tomorrow, November 30th, is National Biliary Atresia Awareness Day. Biliary atresia is also known as BA, and so I just wanted to take a few minutes and share her story, and if it just helps just one person, then that is worth it for me. So my little Kendyl was born on September 25th of 2015. She was 39 weeks. She was born by C-section. She's my second baby, and my first baby was a C-section, and I wasn't dilating. So Kendyl was a C-section as well. She was born at a healthy weight at 7 pounds, 12 ounces. She was just beautiful from the moment she came out, and tons of hair, and she seemed like she was healthy. Her first 3 weeks of life, she was totally an angel, just the sweetest baby ever. She slept all the time, and honestly, it was so easy. My pregnancies are kind of rough, and so I just thought, this is so easy. However, when she was 4 weeks old, everything changed, and it seemed like all of a sudden I had a different baby. She was super fussy. I remember that I would try to nurse her at about 8 p.m. to get her ready for bed, and around midnight, sometimes 1, 2 a.m., I would still be trying to console her and get her down for the night, and by this time I had nursed her again and done the whole bedtime routine again, and so it was really, really hard. She also started throwing up all the time. I think she may have a little bit in those first 3 weeks. I don't remember that as much, but definitely by the time she was 4 weeks old, she was throwing up all the time. I also remember that her stools were just very different. They were really foamy, and they were kind of white, light yellow color. And so we tried everything, but nothing worked. It didn't get better, so finally I took her to the pediatrician, and I was reassured that she just had reflux and that a lot of babies have it, and that she was totally fine. So on December 11th of 2015, I took her in for her 2-month visit, just her routine checkup, and I'll never forget, her pediatrician looked at her for 1 second and said, "Does she look yellow to you?" And at the time I was like, I don't know. I'm always staring at my baby. Like, I don't know. And I also remember that she threw up 3 times just during that doctor's visit. That's how much she was throwing up. So they decided to take labs. I remember she wasn't growing at all. Like, she hadn't grown at all basically in that 2 months. So they were concerned about that. So they took labs, and they sent us home, and they said they would call us back with the results. But I just kind of felt that something was wrong. Sorry. So they called a few hours later and said that the hospital was ready and that we were supposed to take her there. And I remember the pediatrician saying, "I'm so sorry, but most of the time these are very serious things." So it was shortly after that that we were told that she probably had biliary atresia, which is a rare liver disease. And what it is it is in infants, and we all have bile ducts inside and outside the liver, but these bile ducts are clotted, and so the bile cannot drain, and so they basically just destroy the liver. So it was at this time that it was December 17th of that same year, just a week before she turned 3 months, that she had a big surgery called Kasai. And during that, they bring up the small intestine up to the liver and try to drain that bile. And they really like to catch biliary atresia in your in their first few days or weeks at the most of life, before that liver is destroyed. So Kendyl was on the older side, we knew that, but we still hoped for the best. So she had the Kasai on December 17th, and during that they confirmed that she did have biliary atresia, but she also had polysplenia, which is multiple spleens. We were told she has 3 or 4, and some of them are intermingled. And then also she had an abnormal anatomy, and just things were kind of messed up in there. And they still talk about how her anatomy is so different and definitely not normal. So at that point they told us that for sure she was born with biliary atresia. I have heard that some babies can develop it within their first few weeks of life. I don't know much about that because my daughter, we know, was born with it because of her other small issues. So after that big surgery, she was in the hospital for 3 weeks. She came home for 3 weeks. She was back in the hospital for 3 weeks, and it just went back and forth. It was really crazy. So on February 2nd of 2016, the doctors confirmed our worst fears, that she needed a liver transplant. And she got a feeding tube on February 7th. I remember it was Super Bowl Sunday. And she got an NG, and she actually had an NG up until September of this year, just a few months ago. And then at that point she got a G tube. On March 25th of 2016, she was listed for transplant, and after that we just started the waiting game. And we just watched her get sicker every day, and we had several false alarms where we thought it was time for transplant and then things would fall through. And so her care was really, really intense at this time, and it was very difficult. Finally, on July 16th of 2016, my daughter had her liver transplant. We don't know much about the donor, but we do know that it was a deceased baby and that Kendyl got the whole liver. And we have sent out a letter to the donor family shortly after transplant, but unfortunately we have not heard from them. So we know very little. We just know that it was a deceased baby, and we will forever be grateful for that gift that they gave to us. Shortly after her transplant, we were told that her portal vein was clotted, and this was a bummer, but this can happen for sure. But after time it does cause more problems. So she did pretty well for a while, but then it did start affecting different things. It was starting to affect the spleen. Her growth wasn't super great, and it was just affecting different things. So on September 28th of this year, right before just a few days before she turned 2, she had a procedure called a Rex bypass. And again, it was because of an organ donor that made this possible. This surgery, we got a blood vessel from a deceased donor, and during this surgery they were able to put that blood vessel in and bypass the portal vein and put the blood flow back into the liver. It was a very major surgery. It was about 8 hours, which is the same length as her transplant, so it was very big. But yeah, it went well, and overall my daughter is doing pretty well. She is a crazy 2-year-old now, and you wouldn't really know what she's been through if you didn't know her. She looks pretty healthy. She's great. Her only setback is eating, and we're hoping that when they did that latest surgery on September 28th, they also put in a G tube. So instead of her NG that goes in her nose and down her throat, it's just in her belly, and this was kind of more of a long-term solution. We hope she won't have it forever. But also we did it in hopes that she would eat more by mouth and not have that irritating her. And she slowly is doing better. So that is kind of her story in a nutshell, just very briefly. I didn't want to take too much time, but I also wanted to just go through some of the symptoms of biliary atresia. So one of the main symptoms is light stools. Kendall's was white or light yellow. They're also referred to as clay colored stools, so not a lot of color, a lot of throwing up, very, very fussy babies, and then just yellow, which, like I kind of mentioned, it's very, very hard to notice this. As I look at pictures, it's clear to me she was getting more yellow, but as you're always staring at your baby, you don't realize the gradual that they are becoming more yellow. And also, now that I look back, the very corners of her eyes were yellow as well, and that is another symptom. I also wanted to just encourage all of you to be an organ donor. I don't know what it's like, sorry, to be on the other side of this journey, and I can't imagine, but I do know what it's like to be on this side. And because of an organ donor and their family that made that decision, my daughter is alive today. And not only was it the transplant, but her most recent surgery as well that has saved her life, both being deceased organ donors. So that is just kind of her story and what we've been through, and I just wanted to share this in hopes that it will spread more awareness of this disease and that more lives can be saved through organ donation. So I just encourage all of you to be an organ donor if you can. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them below and I'll get back to you. But thanks for watching. That's her story, and we have been so blessed by her team, her whole liver team. We love them all, and just friends and family that have supported us through her major journey. So that is her story. Thanks.